American politics just keeps getting more and more feverish. Today, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer for a decade, Michael Cohen, testified before the US Congress, accusing the president of paying hush money to a former mistress and lying about his business dealings in Russia. Michael Cohen himself is a less than credible figure, facing a jail term for offences including lying to Congress and violating federal campaign finance rules. Similar revelations about any other president would have likely brought him down, but as we know, Donald Trump is not any other president. In a moment, I'll be joined by one of President Trump's closest campaign advisors, but first, here's some of what Michael Cohen had to say in Washington.
Just how susceptible this sitting president might be to potential prosecution.
This is a split-screen made-for-television spectacular.
For those who question my motives for being here today, I understand. I have lied, but I am not a liar. I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat. I am providing the committee today with several documents, and these include a copy of a check Mr. Trump wrote from his personal bank account after he became president to reimburse me for the hush money payments I made to cover up his affair with an adult film star and to prevent damage to his campaign. So to be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. So I lied about it too. And I have done bad things, but I am not a bad man. I have fixed things, but I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump.
Chris Christie ran for president against Trump in 2016, and after dropping out of the race, he became one of Trump's most trusted advisors. He's just published an inside account of his time in politics called Let Me Finish. Chris Christie, what's your take on Michael Cohen's testimony to the US Congress?
Well, listen, it was obviously compelling stuff. For the president's personal lawyer for 10 years to be in Congress testifying so negatively about the president is obviously compelling television. But when you break it down to what really matters, I think there was bad news and good news today in this testimony for the president. The bad news was that, as I've been saying for months, the Southern District of New York is the investigation that he needs to be the most concerned about. And it's clear that Michael Cohen was instructed by Southern District lawyers to not talk about certain things today about criminal conduct, alleged criminal conduct by the president, that they're still investigating. That's bad news for the president, because that means even if Bob Mueller is over soon, the Southern District is probably far from being over. And Michael Cohen left a whole witness list of name dropping that he did today, from Donald Trump Jr. to Ivanka Trump to Jared Kushner to Rona Graff, the president's former executive assistant, to Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization. All those people are going to find themselves with subpoenas up on Capitol Hill. The good news, though, is on the underlying campaign finance charge, that the payments to Stormy Daniels were a campaign finance violation. Michael Cohen gave testimony that was helpful to the president. He said that not only did the president want to stop that story because of the campaign, but just as importantly, he wanted to stop it because he didn't want his wife to find out. Well, paying someone off for your wife not to find out is not a crime. And I'm sure that's what the president's going to say was his motivation. So I think, Michael Cohen's testimony today was actually helpful to the president in that regard. So a mixed day for the president. I thought Republicans performed poorly on the Hill. They didn't substantively defend the president on some of the charges, which I think they could have and should have done. Obviously, this was an uncomfortable day for the president, lastly, because he'd much rather have the world talking about his summit with Kim Jong-un. But instead, your first question's on Michael Cohen, and I can't blame you.
Few people know Trump as well as you. Paint a picture for us of how Trump is likely to be responding to this as he watches from Hanoi.
Oh, he's fuming. He's fuming because not only will he see it as a personal betrayal by Michael Cohen, and as Alan Dershowitz said earlier today, Michael Cohen gave up a raft of attorney-client privileged information today that he may or may not have been entitled to give up. But also, I think it was the lack of defense, effective defense by Republicans on the House committee that probably has him angry too. So I'm sure the president was up very late in the Vietnam evening and early morning watching this on television, and now has a full day of summitry ahead of him in Vietnam. So I'm sure he's not a very happy guy at the moment.
Michael Cohen said that Trump was directing him to lie about business dealings in Moscow, not by overtly telling him to do so, but by coded ways of speaking and acting. What do you think of that?
I thought it was a reach by Cohen. Listen, Michael Cohen has no credibility, okay? But now, I'm a former prosecutor. We used to put liars on the stand all the time. That's an accepted practice. But what you have to do with those liars is you have to have written or other testimonial corroboration of what they're saying, because no one is going to believe a liar like that straight out. I think when Michael Cohen says, the president didn't instruct me to lie, but I knew that's what he wanted, I think people are going to have a hard time believing that unless there's some corroboration of it, which there is not. And so I think Cohen reached a little bit there, and I think he hurt his own credibility even more with that statement.
Well, given his track record of lying, as you say, does he pose a legitimate threat to the Trump presidency or not?
Well, he poses a threat because he's a cooperating witness and acting as a tour guide through the Trump organization, where he was an executive vice president for nearly 10 years. And this is a problem. You don't want your old lawyer being a cooperating witness with the government. And the secrets that Cohen was giving out today are a perfect example of why you don't want that. So I don't know whether there's a threat to the Trump presidency, but it is certainly something that will give a lot of fodder to the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York.
You were intimately involved with the Trump campaign. Did you ever see any evidence of collusion between the Russians and the campaign?
Absolutely not.
In your book, Let Me Finish, you write of Trump, this is a man who wakes up every morning with unparalleled self-confidence, but he also has deficits, significant gaps in his experience and personality that, if left unchecked, will inevitably hobble him. What do you think the worst of those deficits are?
Impulsiveness, that he sometimes acts before he thinks, and that's a problem. It's a problem for anybody, but it's certainly a problem for a president. And some of his personnel decisions and others, as I detail in the book, I think were the product of impulsiveness. And I think of all the president's traits, that's the one that causes him the most trouble.
What do you think would be the most effective kind of candidates the Democrats could run against Trump in 2020?
They have to have someone who is cool, calm, and collected, someone who will contrast Trump in that way, someone who will be able to take the barbs and not, lower themselves, to respond to them. The president likes a street fight. The president's a brawler. And I think that if you try to brawl with him, you probably wind up losing. I think it's somebody who's going to be able to say to the American people that you don't like this. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think that's probably the most effective way to do it, at least given the circumstances as we see them right now.
Do you think it's possible that any Republican would challenge Trump for the nomination in 2020? And are you yourself ever going to make another presidential bid?
I don't think there's anybody significant who would run against the president in 2020. Last poll I saw, his job approval among Republicans was 85%. So there's not a lot of room there to run a winning campaign when there's only 15% of the people who don't approve of the job the president's doing. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm 56 years old, so I would never preclude myself an opportunity to run for president again. But I think my first opportunity to make that decision is going to be in 2024, not 2020.
Chris Christie, thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for everybody, and I hope they enjoy the book.